Welcome to Greenhouse Grower to Grower, the podcast where we talk to growers from across the greenhouse industry about market trends, innovation, their biggest challenges and opportunities, and more. I'm Brian Sparks, editor of Greenhouse Grower. Growers in the floriculture industry face many challenges when it comes to retaining key talent and building the next generation of industry leaders. The same holds true for both university extension and the supplier community, two critical segments of the greenhouse market. In this episode of Greenhouse Grower to Grower, I talked to Melinda Knuth of North Carolina State University and Brian Schulker of Jiffy Group about a range of topics, including how researchers, manufacturers, and growers can all work together to navigate the barriers each of these market sectors are faced with, and what might happen if we don't face these challenges head on. Here's our conversation. Before we get into the heart of the conversation, what I'd like to do is have each of you talk about your own backgrounds in this industry and then how that led you into your current role today. Melinda, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I come from a farming background. I grew up in a family that did row cropping and dairy cows and beef cows. I originally didn't want to do anything related to agronomy. I thought, it's great. My family does it. I don't find it very interesting. And so I found horticulture through floral design and FFA. And that's what I originally went to school for and wanted to open up my own business. I wasn't ready at 22 to open up my own business. So I decided to work in the industry a little while. I worked at a hydroponic facility, found out that wasn't my dream either. So then I started thinking, I really like business. I went to get my bachelor's to start a business. I really like the business side of things. And so I started asking questions to Ellen Paparosi. She was my undergrad advisor, or one of them, I should say. I had a whole bunch. And she said, "Hey, you should talk to Charlie Hall." And I was like, "Who's that guy?" And she connected us, which was great. And then I ended up going to get my PhD at Texas A&M. I love asking questions. Again, I knew that production wasn't my area. It just wasn't what I needed and my focus. So that's why it was like, oh, this side of more business side of things is definitely where I need to be. And originally starting my PhD, I wanted to go out in the industry afterwards, and I fell in love with teaching and research. And it was like, wow, this actually could be a really successful career for me. And I've loved my job here at NC State, and previously when I was a postdoc at UF. This was the correct role for me, was to be an academic and do research, do teaching, and support the industry this way.
Okay, awesome. Brian, what about you? How did you end up where you are today?
So I didn't have a very traditional route to horticulture because I would say when I was a high school student, I did not know horticulture was an actual topic of interest. I grew up in Florida, and you're surrounded by agriculture. You have citrus, you have sugarcane, you have almost anything. And so when I went to do my undergrad at the University of South Florida, I wanted to be an environmental engineer. It was like law, engineer, doctor, and I was like, not doctor, so I moved past that. And so went into environmental, realized that I kind of had a passion for the international business side of environmental science, and then took a job afterwards at the USDA as a trial technician. And so it kind of gave me my entrance to horticulture. I tried to select the research side, but the research leaders that I was under at the USDA in Florida really helped me see that there's way more you can do besides sitting in a lab playing with test tubes.
Sure.
While titration is a cool thing, I prefer to be hands-on in the greenhouse, and that was definitely my entry. And so out of the blue, they actually had contacts. The contact that I had at the USDA also had a new Brian Jackson at NC State. And I had friends who were at Duke University doing their law degree, and so that I was up here randomly. Had an awesome meeting with Brian. It was 6 hours. And the rest was history. I did my master's and PhD under Brian. Didn't know anything about substrates before, and now I would call myself a substrate scientist for sure. And then it kind of dropped me into finding that next career point. I think everyone who did their PhD or is doing their PhD understands how terrifying that last year is, because you're scared of finishing on time. You're scared that you're coming to an end of your college career. You're also terrified you won't find a job. So all of those things are coming together at once. And Jiffy was just so happened to be looking for a PhD level scientist for their U.S. team, because there's the whole research leg is in the Netherlands. And it fell into my lap, and so the rest is kind of history now, I would say.
Okay. So, I know, each of you have your own path, in this industry, and everybody obviously has their own unique path in this. One of the things that I know, Melinda, when you and I were catching up at Cultivate, and this whole discussion first came up about, that while it's great that, that we've all found these roles that we're in, the path is not the same for everybody. And there are some barriers that do exist sometimes. So, I kind of want to ask you, Melinda, so this is, it's become a very important topic for you. Can you talk about a little bit about that today? And then from there, kind of want to talk specifically about, the role that extension has in this industry today.
Yeah. So, going back to our previous discussion, I'm going to reiterate a bunch of points on that. So it's the way that we engage with industry and the function that we perform has changed, I think, a little bit in the academic sphere. Um, Part of it is, I think that a lot of universities have what are called the 2-to-1 model. So for every 2 professors that retire, we get 1 allowable hire back in our department. That's consistent across many universities. That's not everyone's model, but consistent across many, including here at NC State. And this has caused a lot of horticulture departments to become smaller because previously our department was quite large with a lot of people. And now, for example, at NC State, we've been able, fortunately, to hire 4 people in the past 2 years. That means we lost 8. So it's, when you're looking at it from that way, our function changes because we have less people who have to do the same performance to continue to serve the industry, to serve our students, and to perform the roles in different areas of research. And I would also say that this has culminated into also how we communicate. I feel that with students, we're seeing students who are not really connected as much with industry. I think part of it is academics, like especially the teaching faculty, are so focused on performing at the level that we used to that they're overwhelmed in a lot of spaces. And so they're not able to engage as much as they previously could have, unfortunately. So I've seen a lot of change in that way.
Okay. So you look at today and how, growers get their information today. It comes obviously from a wide range of sources right now, from university extension, from their peers, from their suppliers and their business partners. In the face of these challenges, how do you see extension continuing to play a vital role in that?
I think that extension, we hope to always have extension and to continue to serve. This is a core tenet of us as land-grant universities, to be teaching extension and research. That's what was put into the bill that Abraham Lincoln signed. And I think the major thing that has changed is funding and availability of people. And so primarily where extension used to be the one and only source for information for growers, we're seeing that role extending into technical teams for different businesses. And I think that's okay because there's a need and it's being served, but it's being served in a different way than it previously was because of this change.
Okay. Brian, I know you've got, your own path into this industry. How do you see some of this playing out from your perspective?
When you say this playing out, extension or
I'd say extensive, but it's also just as you got into your current role on the supplier side, because we know, it seems like more and more that side of the industry is often having to do a lot of research as well, to really get to know what the needs of the growers that we all serve are. So how is that perspective applied to some of the things that you're doing?
that's a good point. I think our in the on the industry side, especially on the sales side, it becomes really important for our sales teams to have a lot more background knowledge than they ever used to. They're no longer just trying to sell a product; they're trying to sell a solution and fit that solution into your current production system. Because from the industry side of things, education starts at the salesman. It doesn't start behind with the research that we're doing in the lab, because there's always going to be some sort of a disconnect, because there's not it's not often that sales and production and research all talk harmoniously. That would be like teaching extension and research all talking harmoniously. They don't typically work out as we hope they do. And I think there's been a lot more emphasis, especially in industry, on taking R&D out of their silo and putting them with sales.
Okay.
Jiffy as a company recently put the R&D team under sales, because it's important to make sure that we're the technical support that our clients, our growers, and our sales also need.
Okay. Melinda, you talked a lot about some of the barriers that this industry faces. Can you kind of go into that a little more detail?
Yeah, it's I think that from the academic side, and I've touched on this actually in an article that you wrote about me. I think it was like earlier in the year. It was either
That would have been
or
it was for a January issue. Yeah.
yep, there we go. So one of the big issues is that floriculture research is not being funded federally as much as it used to be. In fact, a key area of information that we used to get as economists was the floriculture USDA report, and that's not being done every year anymore. It's, if I am not mistaken, it's being done once every 3 years, and so information is being taken away, and so is the dollars that fund research in those areas. So instead, a lot of researchers are going to companies and saying, and associations, for example, Horticulture Research Institute, American Floral Endowment, going to industry focused areas and saying, hey, we want to do these research projects. Would you like to collaborate? And then to those associations, piecing together different types of money to pay for students to do master's and PhD programs and do research. So that model is looking wildly different than it historically used to. And that's been a challenge. That's also why a lot of faculty, especially in applied positions, are really turning to developing relationships with businesses, is not only to um, know boots on the ground what the true issues are so we can do research on them, but also can we develop relationships so that we have money to do the research, because without that, unfortunately, we can't in a lot of capacities. So that's a huge area where there's been barriers.
Okay. Okay. And I know, as that translates to universities and companies working together on some of that too. Brian, do you have a perspective on that? And one of the things, that is interesting to me is, I mean, and this is not to knock anything that, the supply side entity is doing, because that's valuable research that everybody needs. There's almost that inherent perceived bias, I think, sometimes, that it's coming from a for-profit company as opposed to a university. But the areas that they're focusing on are the same. And a lot of the research, I mean,
Yep.
we don't have as much time anymore today for people to be doing the exact same work. So these types of partnerships seem like they have to be an increasingly valuable part of this process.
No, I completely agree. I think uh, we're in a stage in our industry that you have reduced funding on the floriculture side, and you have increased pressure on companies to deal with these new standards that are being brought by companies, growers, or governments. And these are all pushing us to achieve things that we typically would take 10 to 15 years to do within a 2-year time span. And so that's where our biggest piece comes to these researchers at university level that are focusing on these either niche issues or big issues that are hitting right now, trying to fix yesterday's problem today. And I think that's where there's always been this weird gap between what universities are trying to do and what industry needs them to do. But I'm also seeing a big shift, and I think Melinda's doing the same thing, with researchers at university level that are realizing that, well, maybe I should work closer with these industry partners or go to industry level conferences to get a better perspective on what to do. I think coming from academia for the 6 years I was in grad school to jumping into industry, I learned a lot under my major professor, but I will say I learned a lot more in 6 months working in the industry when it's all thrown at you and they're saying, good luck, make it work. But I love this. I think that there's a European model that I've definitely seen more often with, and not just my company. And believe me, I'm not trying to be that industry person that's just touting my company name. I definitely prefer the research side of things because we're all trying to hit the same topic. But I've seen universities in Europe that are also doing a different model in a way that their students are doing classes for 2 years, and then 2 years they're working with a company. And so they're sending out bids to industry with project ideas for these students to take on at the university level. So they're getting experience. They're leaving college with 2 years work experience, and they have contacts in the industry. So they have a better perspective of what they're trying to do afterwards. I think this is a model we can definitely learn from because it makes it easier for a professor to go out and say, okay, well, what kind of a project can my student do? They're interested in X. They've never worked with this company before. Could this be a good learning experience for them for the next 2 years?
Mm-hmm. Melinda, how do you see that translating then to here?
I see that really expanding. I think that would be a great avenue to explore for internships. Instead of doing a 3-month internship over the summer, could it be expanded to spring and summer or summer and fall, where it's a longer term relationship? Because that's what internships are meant for, is to be that work experience. But it's kind of short and not always helpful. It's not as streamlined as our European colleagues do, because each company has their own system of doing things, and each program at the universities is set up different. So that would be definitely an area I think that we could learn from and say, oh, hey, they do this really well. How can we do this better here? For sure.
I do want to also touch on the topic of the perceived, as a for-profit company, the research is going to their own box. Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's definitely going to be an interesting hurdle that we have to hit in the next 2 years as regulations start to hit, especially in Europe. And for most of the growing media companies that are based in Europe that sell product in North America, we have to hit both markets. And we're not going to have 2 completely separate portfolios because that's not business safe.
Sure.
And so partnering with competing companies to get that research done, or all of us going in as one collective to a research arm with a professor or multiple research leaders on this big grant, that's how we can hit those topics differently without making it seem like we're going to hold on to our little research topic over here and you can't touch it. Like, this is ours. I think because we can't. We won't. Most companies will not be able to either fund how much that will cost to make these big differences happen and find that solution, because every company has their own special sauce for their product. Almost every grow media company uses peat. But what is their special sauce to make their product their own product? So we're going to try and find that exact same solution, and then we all go back to our little silos and make it special.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the phrase, a rising tide lifts all boats, and it seems like that definitely applies here. I mean, as you said, we're not at a point anymore where we can be solely competitors with each other. We have to be able to work together to address some of these challenges. So the fact, and that takes a big step for a lot of companies, I think, to their willingness to say, I'm going to go into these discussions not as a competitor, but as a partner on a higher goal that we all have to hit.
We're seeing a similar thing in the academic sphere. Is we're encouraged not to work singularly, but to work in groups. So where I'm weak, I collaborate with someone else who's strong in my weakness and vice versa. And I've had similar conversations on the tide rises all boats. We don't have to compete as researchers with each other. What if we collaborate instead and share? And that's been a bigger sentiment among faculty in research spheres is where can we collaborate with each other and each of us get the piece of pie that we need to for our tenure promotion, whatever it is, help the industry, and then also we don't compete for these limited resources.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny, Melinda, your point about internships a couple minutes ago kind of dovetails nicely with earlier this week. For those that are listening, Melinda is actually a member of our advisory board for Greenhouse Grower, and we met earlier this week to talk about some of the topics we should be looking at in the year ahead. And this was a key topic, how to improve internships programs across the country, and also just that onboarding process for new employees. And it seems like this is all part of that discussion, I think.
I definitely agree. I wanted to bring up another barrier that is important to be discussed. And I think that's around the fact of, the fact that there's limited resources in academics, and I think in industry too. But what's interesting is for especially as young faculty, we're expected to do a lot more than our previous like our colleagues when they were at the assistant professor level, more than they did. What I mean by that is where it was, I started my research program my third or fourth year into my tenure process. We're expected to have publications within our first year now, where we are we're expected to do more publications, have more money, have this really high level of performance that was greater than our peers when they were going through the process.
Yeah.
And it's made it, I think, for some people who are good, unattainable because they are maintaining these unrealistic hours. The number of middle career researchers within the past 5 years who've had heart attacks or died because of like hypertension issues within academia, not just horticulture, academia is very high, very high. 44-year-olds should not be having heart attacks due to their job. And so that's an area that needs to be discussed. And I think that's a barrier for a lot of excellent scientists to stay in academics is because they are they get burned out and it's very stressful, and there's these really, really high, almost, dare I say, unrealistic expectations for them in their jobs.
No, and that's definitely a very clear fact, because when I was looking for my job and when kind of the cohort of us finishing our PhD at the same time, we're all discussing what our next steps were. 95% of us were looking industry for the quality of life and work-life balance. Now, I'm not saying that I work 38 and a half hours a week. I promise you I do not. But I can say that there's a lesser chance that people going into industry are going to have that heart attack at 44. You can work yourself to death in any industry that you go into, or any job, does not matter. But I do understand, I do agree with Melinda here on when I was looking for positions and I was looking at academia and industry, this was a huge piece to me when I was considering what my next steps were going to be. Because you're looking around you at all the new professors that are coming in especially when you're there for 5 or 6 years, and you can see it happening right in front of you. So do you want to follow in those footsteps, or do you want to take another path?
Yeah, that's a good point, because you still need the sector of the industry, and as much of a challenge as it is. To your point, Melinda, I love the fact that that you're being very proactive about this and saying this has to be addressed here soon, or else really. You're not. Extension is such an important part of this industry, and you risk losing that if you don't address some of these challenges now.
Absolutely, and if it's not addressed, I think that the really, really good people are going to choose like other career paths. Like Brian's a great example. He would be excellent in the academic space. But obviously it's not appealing because of the conditions that are currently in place. And it's not, some people might have a follow-up conversation with me after this podcast and say, oh, it's not that way at my university. This is just an NC State problem. And I can tell you for the number of young faculty I know, even in Europe, this is not a just NC State issue. This is um, Western, a Western culture issue on in academics is just more and more and more and more. But where is the line, and how can we establish a healthy line to be appealing to the best students who are coming out of our programs to stay and do excellent research and amazing jobs and be excellent mentors for our students in a teaching capacity.
Sure.
That's definitely a big piece too. I think people going into academia or looking at academia or current people in it, you have there is the three pillars, their extension, research, and teaching, but not everyone wants all three or likes all three. Some people love teaching and have a touch of research that they want to dabble into. Some people want to be 90% research and teach one 5-week course. And that's the thing. It's okay. Like you can still like that. And I think that's the issue. I think you're trying to be all things to all people and an accountant.
Yes.
So I feel like there's a lot of pieces that you're not prepared for as a professor when you jump into it. Because I truly loved teaching. I taught 2 courses and I'd TA'd for many. And I loved having any new research student come into the lab or other labs and help mentor them. That was one of the best things. But the rest of that circle was not what I was looking into.
I remember, and I know we've had this conversation for years, even within, our own halls of our publishing company here. In my past life here at Meister, I wrote for our magazine, American Fruit Grower, and we did a whole cover story on the fading role of extension. And it's the same challenges. I mean, you've got the teaching, you've got the research, and you've got the extension side of it. And you can't, nobody can do, nor should they be expected to do all of that at once. But, how do you do that in a time like this where you're facing some of those funding and time issues? So, it's not a problem that's new, but it's a problem that continues to build and build, to your point, Melinda, where there's going to be a breaking point somewhere, I think. I do want to talk a little bit about, as you see these challenges, and then you also see some of these opportunities in the form of these partnerships that we've talked about so far. How does some of that then work its way through to our audience at the grower level? How does this eventually benefit what they're doing? And then can some of these growing operations be a part of this process at the same time?
I would say, what are the solutions to this? I really do think collaboration is the key here. We, like Brian said, we can't be everything to everyone, but by working together, we can establish and complete all the things that are important. Some of the things may fall to the wayside, but I think it also has to come to prioritization. What's truly important? And the solution is collaboration in my mind.
Okay.
No, I completely agree with that. I think even from an industry perspective, if we have any new products that we're trying to launch on the market, we don't launch that product before a customer or a grower or even a researcher sees it first, because there's always going to be multiple checks and balances along the way. And that's where we lean on our professors and our universities and our growers that we partner with or they've been customers for us for a while, to make sure that we can do all things to all people. But it doesn't mean that we are doing all things to all people. The collaborative is getting through there. And so I think that's, and to Melinda's point, I think the only way to move forward and to find that solution is to partner together in, whether it's a grant or a research proposal or a master's or PhD student or some sort of a group project with an interested grower who comes to Melinda for a solution and Melinda comes to me for another solution. That's how we can find our ways together.
Yeah. And I think that these collaborations were not talking necessarily about money. We're talking about sharing information. We're talking about sharing resources. We're talking about just conversations, even like having just open conversations. What it has been very valuable to me with especially growers is them opening up their doors and allowing me to come see how they do things and ask them questions and even just straight up ask them, how can I help you? Like, what are your problems? I would love to hear what your problems are and see if I can be part of that solution. And then from discussing problems, then saying, this is where I can help you, or that's not my expertise, but I know someone who does this area. And it can be as simple as that in terms of collaboration. It doesn't always have to be dollar signs. It can, even sometimes, for example, I have a really good partnership with a large greenhouse in the US, and we share data. That's what we do. We share data back and forth, and that's how we collaborate. There's no money exchange. There's an open door policy on both ends, and we share data back and forth, and it's fantastic. And that is a great, that's a great collaboration that I have. And I see that as, part of this solution.
And to go all the way back to the extension question, that's really where extension and university comes into play more so than industry. Because if I walk in there with a Jiffy shirt on or any other company, then then the perceived idea is that I'm going to try and sell you a product, or my solution to your problem is definitely in my portfolio. And it's not always the case. So that's why when someone like Melinda or anybody else in extension goes in, there isn't that perception. So the conversation can be a lot more honest and open.
Yeah, but and to your point there, Brian, that conversation still seems like it needs to be just as critical on your end, because I mean, you guys don't want to be looking to create products, create solutions in a vacuum. You need to hear from the growers and say, as Melinda pointed out on her side, it applies as much to you. What are your pain points? What are the challenges that you're facing? And then the role that we play in this industry, what can we then do to address some of these challenges?
Exactly. And that's for me on the R&D team. I think that's the biggest piece, and that's my favorite thing to do, is to go out to one of our customers or even not one of our customers and see what they're doing, see what their issues are, because we can make the best possible product, or anyone can, in a lab on small scale and say, this is the future of horticulture. Can that be brought up to mass produced? Probably not. But if I don't go and talk to a grower and find out that their solution might just be it needs to hold water for 5 more hours, we can make that happen. It doesn't always have to be a complicated solution, but I wouldn't learn that if I didn't talk to them.
Yeah, exactly. So where do we go from here then as an industry? You've got two segments of the industry here, and you've got the grower side as well. How do we continue to push this forward then, so that we can address some of these challenges before, as Melinda said, before it gets too late in some cases? What can we do as an industry to keep moving forward on this?
I think a big area is, well, there's a couple of things going on in my brain right now. It's like a little hamster wheel, just like go, go, go. Mm. The first is supporting your universities through being external advisory committees. We are looking, I serve on the external advisory committee as a departmental rep for our horticulture department here at NC State. Serving on those committees is important because then you can, as a grower, say, this is important to me, and it's communicated to the department. That would be a key feature, especially if we're talking about that burnout or that expectation side of things. Is we want the best professors in our departments. We also want to make sure that they are healthy and they are able to do their job. So what are the expectations set on them? And, this is what we expect as an industry of our faculty, and setting those expectations. Obviously, you can't control what people ultimately do, but, the industry is very good at work-life balance and having those healthy boundaries. Is that something that they can teach the academic side of the industry? Another thing that would be great is when academics talk to growers, I know sometimes it's like, oh, this person, this person wants something from me. Not necessarily, you can always open the door to them and just have a conversation and see what they are wanting. Or if they are asking for money and you're not able to give money, offer instead some sort of partnership on, hey, I can share resources with you. I don't have any money to give you, though. I'm sorry. Most researchers are still going to be happy with that. I'll be honest. We'll still be like, oh, ooh, okay, like we can still collaborate. And so don't be afraid to, if a researcher comes to you and is like asking for money, there's other ways that you can collaborate too. Of course, it'd be great if you could give everybody money. If everyone could give everybody money, that'd be fantastic. That's not real life. So what are other ways that you can still stay connected and keep the sharing going? Because I think that's the future of our industry is and how that's going to go. So those are things that I think we will go.
Well, and I think to your point there too, it sounds like the most difficult step in that process is that opening of the door. Once you do that, then the conversation can ideally flow right from the discussion there, but you have to start that process for it to continue.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what I wouldn't call it the reverse of Melinda's answer, but I think to go even further back, I think one of the biggest pieces that I missed as a student, and I know a lot of students are missing it, and I know a lot of younger professors are trying to bring this in, but I don't think anybody understands the industry at all throughout your bachelor's degree. It is just this thing out here that you can talk about on your last semester as a student when you're about to look for jobs. And it seems to be the only way they're going to learn. And I think one of the biggest pieces is that we have a lot of industry people who came from universities that they could easily go back and give back to. And like Melinda said, it doesn't have to be in money. I think I'm really lucky where I live that I graduated from NC State, still live in Raleigh. And all I want to do is go back and talk to these students, guest lecture, or give small presentations, not even on my company, but on my history and on my story. Because I think these are ways that students can ask questions to understand, how do I get to maybe not where you are, but within the industry, how do I even look for these jobs? How do I apply for these jobs? What is necessary to get them? I mean, I would say the last time I did this, I had a lot of students that were asking what degree I need. That is not always the correct answer or correct question. I think you need to think back about what you actually want first and then move forward. So having students understand their expectations from the beginning can help prevent these slaps in the face, per se, when they are looking for jobs or when they're about to jump into a career field. Or if they want to go to a master's degree, they don't need one or they don't want one. They just think they have to.
Yeah.
Which can trickle into the industry easily from there.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to Melinda, our discussion earlier this week, where it's all about setting realistic expectations. And, you start internship programs or you bring somebody new into your company and you want to make sure that it's the job that's for them. You also want to make sure that if it's ultimately not going to be a job for them, you identify that early so that they're not wasting their time in something they don't want to do. And you're not wasting your time, as a grower or as a supplier, whoever, having somebody that ultimately this is not going to be the right role for them. If you can identify that early enough, that takes care of a lot of headaches right away.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The key being there that we need more conversation between industry and students and how we can make that happen. I love inviting industry members into my classroom. I love visiting them. I wish I could visit more, but I only have a finite number of hours in the day. So, realistically, taking them on field trips constantly is really hard. But collaboration there is key. So go where the students are. Also allow students to come to you and developing excellent internships where students can come and learn and exactly find their space. Yes, this area of horticulture is for me, or no, it's not, but I at least learned this is a part of the industry and I'll go find the area that is meant for me.
Yeah. Well, and you've got some of these emerging sectors of the industry too, like, the CEA market, for example. When I talk to a lot of the horticulture department chairs earlier this year for some of our content. And that's one thing they were telling me is a lot of the students will go to those areas because you I guess you tend to hear a lot more about them now because it's a newer industry that, not to say this industry is on a growth path, but they're on an accelerated growth path right now. And, if that's your entry point, it's better than not doing that at all.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, and for the internship side, I mean, they're not always just lab technician, grower, student. It doesn't. We had a bioinformatics specialist as an intern because all they wanted to do was take our data and create models. And I will never say no to more models. Well, for me, that's the thing. I think horticulture is evolving. We're going from what traditionally we look at, which is in your photo, but people don't look at that photo and say, how high tech is that? And so, but we're having engineers, we're having data scientists, we're having PhD level scientists in the industry that are, by all means, being trained by Melinda or people like Melinda. And we need more of this collaboration, or else they won't understand how to get there or what to do when they get there.
Yep.
Sure.
Or go to an industry, go to a company and pitch your idea because they might not even have thought of that. I think when we got our bioinformatics specialist, no, we did not think of that as our first internship opportunity. But I can tell you how cool it has been to work alongside someone with way more data science skills than I think I'll ever have. I peak at Excel, and I peak at statistical analysis software, but outside of that, no.
Well, and I use this example a lot personally, but I love what a group like Seed Your Future is doing with their resources page on their website, where, I mean, if you go on there, you're blown away by the amount of roles that there are in this industry, probably at least half of which you don't have to touch a plant, see a plant. It's all catered to what your specialty is. So you can be in sales, you can be in marketing, you can be in social media, you can be in HR or whatever. There's going to be a role for you in this industry, even if plants are something that have not been and very well may never be a huge area of interest for you. There's roles in this industry for you regardless, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that for any academics listening to this, I think it would do well to share that website with your students and with your horticulture clubs to showcase, like Brian was saying, Brian Squared here on the call, the breadth and the depth of options in our industry and just how diverse it is, just like how diverse our student bodies are. There's a space for everyone.
I want to, as we wind down the discussion, just look one more time at the future. I know we've talked about, the challenges obviously that are going on in this industry, but, this is still a very quickly evolving and engaging and exciting industry. What excites each of you, and I'll start with you, Brian, first, about the future of this industry? Where are we headed, and what excites you the most?
I think, like Melinda, I have about 40 things in my head on this one, but I think one of the biggest pieces to me is that we as our generation is currently in this industry, or generation above us, we're in the thick of a completely evolving model for growing plants. We are not just outdoor horticulture or agriculture. We are indoor. We are windowless indoor for vertical farms. I mean, and for a substrate company, I'm also in the middle of, some would say, a crisis, and some would say an opportunity for how to create new materials to grow plants. I think I can't even, I mean, I'm a little bit geeky in terms of substrates, and not everyone is for sure, but I will say it's really cool, the research that's being done and the research that I'm seeing globally, and how much it's increased in just the past 5 years in this specific field, to just find new materials, new sustainable materials to grow plants in. That entire picture behind you, I know everyone who's listening can't see your photo, but it's just a beautiful greenhouse, could be grown in anything. And that's kind of the subject of my role on an innovation team, and anybody else in the industry or as a student looking into these materials. I think, I don't know, the future is really, really bright. There may be people that are looking at the regulations coming into horticulture and the issues that can come from any market movement. But to me, that's the most exciting part is, okay, cool. Next. What's next? How do we get to that next step?
Sure, absolutely. Melinda?
Oh man, I feel like Brian took more of the science side of it. I'm going to take more of the social side of it.
Yeah.
I am so excited to see how our industry evolves in how we conduct business, how we communicate with each other. I see this changing. This has changed even within the past 10 years. We are now doing e-commerce. 10, 15 years ago, this wasn't a thing. Or it was only a thing for a small group of people. We're now doing e-commerce. I think that the way we communicate with each other, the way our supply chain functions on a logistics level is going to change dramatically. But I don't see this as a bad thing. I see this as an opportunity to create new positions for people to innovate our product, for innovate even the way that we deliver to consumers. I also am very excited because our consumer body is changing. It's not our typical older white women who are affluent anymore. It's a very diverse group of people. Our audience is diversifying. That creates opportunity for us to offer a diverse plant offering and service offering to these people. So how we create our competitive advantage is going to evolve and for each individual company. And I think that this is awesome. Like the way that we can create value is going to become better. And instead of saying, oh, the way we communicate is changing. Oh no. And like, oh, our consumer's changing. I don't know how to communicate with them. This is really exciting. You can create more value. You know, if you're staying up and like understanding them and communicating with others and trying to make yourself better, there's an opportunity to make your margin bigger. And I think that is very exciting.
Thanks for joining us. You can learn more at greenhousegrower.com. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen, and please leave us a rating as it helps other podcast listeners find the show.